Hello, BookTube, and welcome to my library tour. We're continuing this library tour on Boston's very first actually cold day. It was a cold night. It's been a cold morning, accentuated here at Hyde Cottage by the fact that apparently my fuse box is getting decrepit with age because the space heaters, the little electric space heaters that it used to be able to handle without so much as sneezing, they now shut the fuse box down completely, and I don't know what to do about that. Don't know if it's something I need to bring an electrician in to take a look at the fuse box itself, or maybe the fuses need replacing, or I have no idea. I know that once upon a time, for years, these things worked, and now all of a sudden they don't. Now all of a sudden, if I turn an electric space heater on to augment the crappy heat here in the house, which goes right out the 150-year-old windows, the space heater will run just fine, and I'll be nice and toasty for about an hour, and then that fuse goes out. So I'll lose not only the space heater, but all the electric outlets along that wall. And I have to get my surly houseboy to go downstairs and fix whatever it is, to throw whatever switch it is. So I'm really feeling the cold. It's not just that it's really cold, it's that I'm really feeling it. But I thought we'd continue with the library tour even so. I can do that. And I don't need to, I thought I was going to have to fuss around with the sexy tripod angles, but the books, we're not down low enough on this bookcase so that I need to stoop or anything. They're right at waist level, so it'll be easy to do. And the first one we see here is a double or a triple or a quadruple. It illustrates the fact that it really is coming home in this library tour, that when I see an old book that's a favorite of mine, I buy it, even if I have copies of it. So I end up with multiple copies. This is William Service's book Owl, a thin little thing in which he takes in an owl, a tiny little owl, who then terrorizes the home. And he, in a series of almost aphoristic observations, he just watches this creature, this alien creature, this knowable alien creature. And it is, the understatement makes it just tremendously memorable. I just love it so much. I think it's fantastic. And we've seen it before in this library tour, I guess. Every time I see a copy, I get one. So I have multiple copies. Okay, this next one is from, I think 2008 is when the paperback came out. And I had, I had a book blog, Stevereads, that I started, I think, in 2006. And for a while, for a year, I did what other blogs that I had observed online did. I pitched the whole thing like a blog. So I was an active part of it. Personality, there was a rotating cast of semi-fictional characters. It was all about attitude and improvisation and slang and bouncing between ideas. And after a while of that, I got a little dissatisfied, a little impatient. I wanted it to be more about books. And it turned out that later on at Open Letters Monthly, my co-editors and I decided to give me a space on the front page of the website called Open Letters Weekly, where I could review as many books as I want. I didn't have to wait and just do one a month. Because when I got back into reviewing in 2006 or late 2005, I ran into the same problem that I had the last time I was in reviewing. Only there was no blogosphere then, so it was a much worse problem then. There was no internet the first time. But that problem is that I read a lot more than a lot of people do, and I write a lot faster than a lot of people do, and as a result, and there's never anything that I read that I don't have thoughts about, as you know, since it's driven you crazy over the last 3 years. And the inevitable result of that, back in the good old days, was that I would want to review far more books than I could get commissions to review. And I had to, write about them in my journal or talk to them about them with friends or whatever. But when the internet came along, that problem was solved, because suddenly you could have a blog and also a website. And once Open Letters Weekly gave me an outlet for regular reviewing of new releases, I started using Stevereads. I changed its tone. I stopped making it chatty, bloggy, and started just making it a consideration of books, usually out of print books, usually stuff that wasn't coming to Open Letters as a review copy. And I signalized that change in tone by writing about a new book, this book, On Chesil Beach by Ian McEwan. I didn't keep reviewing. I didn't keep writing about new books. on Stevereads. I moved them to Open Letters Weekly. But I did shift. The change was this entry. Not that anybody cares. This is ancient history, and no one's watching. No one's looking at the history of Stevereads. But for me, I remember it vividly because it was a gamble. I wasn't sure. I'd never done anything in this format before. I wasn't sure how it would work. And I thought, well, I'll pick a new book to do this with, because that at least I'm familiar with doing. And boy, did I pick a doozy. I don't know what to say about this book. I don't want to spoil it for those of you who haven't read it. And it's easy to spoil because it is a one-trick pony. There's one thing that happens in this book. Half of it is flashbacks to before that one thing. And then the other half of it is everything that happens as a result of that one thing. And that one thing happens in the middle of the book. And it's easy to give away. I could summarize it in less than one sentence. Those of you who read this book will know exactly what I'm talking about. The one thing, I won't give away what it is, but it is downright strange. In fact, if this thing weren't being written by one of our greatest living novelists, I don't think there's anybody in the world who wouldn't think that one thing was just downright silly. And yet, I don't think, even now, I've read this thing 3 times, I've written about it twice, I don't think McEwan is joking. It could be that it's so Mandarin, that the joke is so po-faced, that I'm not getting it, even after all this time, but I don't think so. I think he means it. I think it's intentional, and if so, I think he ought to get out more. Because anyway, I wrote about this for that new iteration of Stevereads, and I'm sure I can find it, so I will link it down below, and you can go into it, forewarned. The review, I'm pretty sure, gives away the whole book, so, be forewarned. But it still baffles me. So, of course, I had to keep the book. I don't think I have any other Ian McEwan here. Even Atonement. I think I've had copies of Atonement from time to time and just got rid of them. Donated them to people or whatnot. But on Chesil Beach, I'm going to keep, because it has a little space in my heart because of that change from the bloggy version of Stevereads to something else, to something I hadn't seen on the blogosphere before that I was going to just do myself. Okay, this next one is another classic, another thing that I love. Probably I would buy multiple copies if I saw them. This is A Book of One's Own by Thomas Mallon, who might infuriate me as a historical novelist. He does very much infuriate me as a historical novelist. But this book is his nonfiction rumination, an account of journal keeping, of people keeping personal journals. He looks at some famous historical examples. His account of Samuel Pepys is to die for. And he also gives broader reflections on what the whole idea of journal keeping is. I myself have kept a journal for a very, very long time. I have changed the way I do it. I used to keep them in uniform little books. And then I thought, well, that's a little bit restrictive, because I don't just want these are more. My journal is more than just written accounts. I also want it to be a chronicle of a year, and that means pictures and clipped articles and whatnot. And that makes a fixed bound volume kind of awkward. So then I tried spiral bound volumes, and those work kind of well, but they are a lot of work and they get awful messy. And right now, I have the last few years I have stumbled on an approach that I really like, which is a flat cardboard document box that you can get, at any stationery store. I just get a flat cardboard document box and write my journal entries on loose sheets of paper and just put them in like snowfall. I just put them in one on top of the other. And the benefit there is that in addition to putting in, my journal sheets, I can make a journal entry anywhere. As long as I have a piece of paper, I can make a journal entry on a train, away from home, in a different room. I don't have to fetishistically hold on to the volume. And B, I can throw in everything else as well. I can throw in pictures, little keepsakes, cards that I get in the mail, including from some of you, stuff that I definitely want to date and keep, but that I couldn't put in a book, not comfortably. I get to just throw in all of that stuff and just fill the whole box. And then when I'm done with my journal for that year, well, then I just seal the box, wrap some twine around it, write the date on the end, and put it in a pile and start with the next one. That's the approach I'm taking now. I like it very much. And this is all about the ethos of keeping a personal journal. As Thomas Mallon puts it rather well, nothing, it turns out, never happens. It's not ever that nothing happens. Something always does. Nothing never happens. So your journal keeping is a number of different strange exercises. I virtually never reread my journal entries. Virtually never, going all the way back to before Watergate. I virtually never do it. But I wouldn't miss the experience for all the mud in Egypt. And I think the reason why has nothing to do with chronicling your own life. That use for your journal comes later, when you're gone. And everybody that might want to know you or that might have known you will be unbelievably grateful that you kept a journal. But that's outside of your ken. That's after you're gone. The real benefit for me, the thing that keeps me coming back doing it, is the exercise of summarizing your experiences in words. It not only unbelievably increases your skill at writing, just unbelievably, not just the skill at writing, but the speed of writing. Because your journal entry, you're only human. You're going to save it to the end of the day, and you're not going to want to do it. But you're not going to leave anything out either. And so you get good at writing collected, clear, forceful prose quickly. But it's not only that. It's also that it helps you yourself in being forced to think about those things in order to write about them. It's just an utterly invaluable thing. I urge every one of you to try it if you don't already. And of course, if you do keep a journal, you know the drill. I want to hear all about it. I want to nose in and hear all about it. But anyway, this is, if you keep a journal and you haven't found this book, oh boy, you're going to love it. It's all about that. Okay, next we have a National Geographic book. I've mentioned these before. I've shown you quite a few of them. They're, once upon a time, National Geographic did these oversized, extremely heavy-duty, full-color illustrated original books where they would have a new introduction, new preface, a lot of times new supporting material, and then they would reprint various articles from their magazine. And they were wonderful. They're wonderful books. I don't know of one that's a dud. And this one is Wild Animals of North America. And as you can see, my copy has taken a beating. it's oh God, don't tell me. Oh no, I thought, okay. I opened the book just at random to the Fisher. That is a Fisher. That's roughly its size. That's also roughly its ferocity. And the reason why that is pointed a little is because Fishers are extremely common up at the little farmhouse in Vermont. And as you can tell from that picture, they're 3 times as big as Frida. They don't come out during the day usually, but nevertheless, the little farmhouse is on my mind because I might visit this winter. And this is the National Geographic Wild Animals of North America. And as you can tell, my copy, oh boy, my copy has been reinforced a couple of times. I just love it. It's original color artwork, but also National Geographic black and white photos. And it's just profiles of these different kinds of animals in North America, what they're like, mating cycles, food, distribution, all that sort of thing. Just a wonderful National Geographic book. I pull it off the shelf all the time. There's one other book. It's got to be here. I'm sure that it's in this room. There's one other guide to North American wildlife, in addition to the National Geographic book, that I also love. It has to be in this room, so we'll get to it. But I wouldn't miss the National Geographic volume. And what is it? Oh, okay. All right, this next one is a classic of nature writing. We've seen a lot of those. There's quite a bit of nature writing in this room. I love it. I love nature writing. I love it when a really observant human being goes into the wild, or in the case of Owl, just stays in their living room, and just observes a particular kind of animal and does it exhaustively, usually over time, and philosophically as well, without preconditions. I love that. If somebody did that about Fishers, I'd be wild with joy. And if somebody has done that about Fishers and you know about the book and I don't, please tell me. Oh, this is a classic. This is Cynthia Moss's Elephant Memories, where she follows a matriarchal clan of elephants and learns the personalities and watches the children being born and watches the rearing and watches how they deal with the environments and storms and drought and whatnot, and learns a lot about them in the process. This is just an immortal book. A little bit melancholy. It's a little bit melancholy, of course, for me, in a way that when I first read it, it really wasn't. Because the youngest people watching this video right now, I happen to know for a fact that there are a couple people watching this video who are 5 and 6 years old. And they're going to grow up in a world, by the time they're my age, there'll be no elephants in the world, not even in zoos. The zoo populations will have died out. So there won't, by the time they're my age, books like Elephant Memories will be talking about the past in exactly the same way as if you read a book on the buffalo or the passenger pigeon. And that's melancholy, because I've met these animals in the wild. And it's not fun to meet them in the wild. Don't get me wrong. It's not fun to meet them in the wild. They are unbelievably big. And the African elephants are... Anyway, I could tell you stories. In my animal encounter stories in the wild, I always say the one ace in the hole for me, whether it was with moose or bear or whatever, was that I always had a crowd of dogs with me, and no animal is willing to challenge that because they know they'll lose. No matter who you are, if you're a lion, you're going to lose against a bunch of dogs. If you're a tiger, God forbid, you're going to lose against a bunch of dogs. That does not apply to elephants. And that does not apply. Elephants couldn't care less. They're as big as buildings. Nothing can hurt them. And a crowd of dogs means it's just going to take them longer to crush every single one of them like a ripe grape. Actually, the same thing is true of rhinos and hippos. They also don't care. But they're much smaller than elephants, big as they are. They're much smaller than an elephant. An African elephant doesn't care at all. So those were much more hair-raising encounters in the wild when you're walking along a path in what is now a relatively well-tended game preserve, but was once then just the wilderness. When you're walking along a worn dirt path with your dogs, and suddenly over the tops of the trees along the side of the road coming up to where you are, you suddenly see the top of a head, gigantic top of a gray head that is peering over the tops of those trees at you. That's an unbelievable moment. That moment doesn't feel anything like a similar moment where you walk into the middle of an alpine clearing, and on the other end of the clearing you see a bear. And a bear maybe stands up or paws the ground or grunts a little. If you're in that situation and you're walking with a bunch of dogs, and in addition to, extremely imperious beagles, you maybe have much bigger dogs that you picked up, strays from the last town you were in. It's a tense moment, but it's a standoff between them and the bear is going to back down, which is very different than that moment in Namibia or wherever, where you see that head suddenly slowly look up over the trees, and you know that you're screwed, that the body attached to that head can get to you in less than 30 seconds and is going to ignore your dogs, and the dogs couldn't hurt it even if they tried. So those are tenser moments. But nevertheless, even though I've had my share of those moments, I highly recommend Elephant Memories. Pretty sure it's not in print anymore, but you can get it. It had a million copies. So, okay. All right, well, this is a book you've certainly heard me talk about. This is Illumination in the Flatwoods by Joe Hutto. This is a great book in which the author goes to the wilderness and meets a bunch of turkeys, meets a group of turkeys. What is the name? I used to know the name I don't remember the name of it now. I don't remember the name of a group of turkeys, but he imprints on a group of very young turkeys, and then they go into the wild, and he follows them in there, and they start to become wild birds, but they're still able to communicate with him. There's not a closed circuit. There's no door there. And he's able to see what they're like, and you will be too, and it changes you completely. It changes you completely to read this book. You suddenly realize, in my case, had it hammered home again and again and again. I've had this lesson many, many, many times. You only have to spend a little while hanging out, not herding, not ordering around, not feeding, but hanging out on an endless high summer Iowa day with pigs, to realize that this is true of all advanced animals. And the thing that I'm talking about is that they're people. They're people. They all have individual personalities. They all have varying degrees of patience and playfulness. They all hate suffering. They're all afraid of pain. They all hate death. They all do. They are people. And that's what he discovers in the course of this, and it's eye-opening to see it happen. I don't know if Illumination in the Flatwoods is still in print. I hope that it is, and if it is, maybe read it before Thanksgiving. Maybe do that. Anyway, what is this next one? Oh, okay, great. Oh, great, fantastic. All right, this is a very slim thing. God almighty, this is only 100 pages soaking wet. I don't know what this format with the extra thick paper and the extra thin pages, the tall pages, gets it up to 140 pages, but it's 100 pages soaking wet. And despite the fact that it's 100 pages soaking wet, you wouldn't believe the hammer and tongs amount of effort it took to get this out of its author. This would take me one afternoon of hard work to write. And we're talking years. Advances gone over and over again like the snows of yesteryear. This is Scoundrel Time by Lillian Hellman. And boy, oh boy, was it worth the wait. It's a tiny little thing, but it is her, one of her memoirs, and it is just scintillating. Just brilliant. Just brilliant. Hence the fact, I guess, that it's in here instead of being out with biographies and memoirs. But what a book. I don't know how to describe it any other way. Every single page just glows with her horrible velociraptor wit that just sticks with you. Oh, all right. Okay, this is a very beat up copy. Okay, this is not inscribed, right? No, this is not inscribed. This is just a very beat up copy of a great book, but I need to get another copy of this. So if Frida and I do go up to the little farmhouse in Vermont, I have a small shopping list. Actually, it's very long. I bring a long list of things up to Vermont because I don't usually have access to a car. I have access to muscular young men who are willing to tote bale and lift hay, but not usually a car. The one car that we tend to have access to is usually in use at the family restaurant. So it's a rare day when that happens. So I don't get to go to all sorts of places. I don't drive a car myself. Don't know how. Never sat behind the wheel of a car in my life. So when I go up to the little farmhouse in Vermont, we tend to do some driving around, running errands to knock items off Steve's list. His long list, his long, shrill, demanding, foot-stamping list. And one of those, because it's Mark Richardson, many of those errands involve book hunting for books that neither one of us needs at all. But because both of us are able to get books by asking for them. I mean, he has to do it with a library budget. I have to do it by, writing about them. But either way, we're the last people in the world to be going out feverishly hunting for books. And yet, I guarantee you that if I go up there for the winter holidays, you're going to see us do book hauls. And this is a book that I should look for when I'm up there, because this is in really bad shape. It's a hardcover, but it's in really bad shape. And it's a great book, so I deserve to have a better copy. This is The Demon Haunted World by the great Carl Sagan. One of his greatest books. And one of his most prescient books. This is all about the hope that science is. As silly as that sounds to those of you who were raised fundamentalist, the hope that science gives us for clear thinking and for actual working solutions, not just to the raw physical problems that face the world, renewable energy, climate crisis, which is barely a hint in the eye of the author when he wrote this book, but also an aid to credulousness, an aid to making people think critically, a reminder, as so many science popularizers say, that science is a process rather than a thing. It's a way of looking at the world. And it's never been more eloquently evoked than in this book, which is all about how science can be a cure for con men and hucksters. Not because it scientifically proves them wrong, but because it teaches you a way to think that they can't do anything about. I can't recommend it highly enough, but look at this thing. It's got ink stains in the front and inside of the dust jacket. It's got a big scar along the front. Didn't I notice? Yeah, it's got some purple ink underlining in the book itself. Wow. Okay, so my original copy of this is long gone, I guess, but I really need to get another copy of this, another hardcover. All right. This next one, it's 2 volumes. Boy, oh boy, I cannot recommend this strongly enough. It's an outlay of money. But if you are religious minded, or if you love the study of religion, there's an argument to be made that I am both. This is just a massively incredible thing. This is the Norton Critical Edition. We've mentioned the Norton Critical Edition many times on this channel, right? They give you the text of a work, and then they give you considerations of the work, contemporary sources, contemporary reviews, later interpretive essays. Just invaluable for teaching in the classroom, but also I have found invaluable for studying a work just in your own room, in your own little book room. And Norton Critical Editions did a 2-volume Norton Critical Edition of the King James Bible. That's what this is. Old Testament and the New Testament and the Apocrypha. And I don't know if I'm going to be able to really make it clear to you. Every single section has a long and brilliant introduction, and there are footnotes all throughout both volumes that are extremely detailed. These are just, this is really just the ultimate King James Bible, just the ultimate. Talk about pulling a book off the shelf many times. I do this many, many times. There are many Bibles in this room, but oh my, they're most of them put to shame by these 2 volumes. The only problem is that because they're for schools, they are originally intended for schools, they're not sturdy, as you could tell. I mean, look at this. This is an enormous 1,000-page paperback that has the floppy paper and a very flimsy cover. As far as I know, there are no hardcovers of either of these volumes, or get them in a heartbeat. But if you like studying your Bible, get these 2 volumes. They'll be expensive, I'm sure, but get them anyway. You're going to use them. You're going to make that money back in a year, and you're going to keep using them. So anyway, oh, great. Oh, fantastic. Okay. This is Everyman's Library. This is from 2017. We saw this on this channel. Irritatingly, Everyman Library never sent me a finished copy of this. I do not have a hardcover of this, and I want it. So that's another thing to put on the Amazon list, I guess. This is Anthony Trollope's The Duke's Children. This is the advanced copy, which has stuff stuck in it. I really need to get the hardcover of this. And this is, you know, you might think, okay, well, what's the big deal? Or, you know, I know that The Duke's Children is your favorite Trollope novel, but there are plenty of other editions, but there are none like this. The editors here dug through the original periodical publication of The Duke's Children. It was released in periodical form before it was collected in book form. They went through that and pieced that together to make this book. When it came time for Trollope to fulfill the book deal end of his publication arrangement, his publisher told him to cut tens of thousands of words. And he did it. He was, you know, practical to a T. So he did it, but he didn't do it by cutting out weak chapters. Instead, he went through chapter by chapter, line by line, and melded the cuts very seamlessly, so that A, when you're reading, for instance, the Oxford paperback of The Duke's Children, you'd never guess you're reading any kind of abridgment, even one done by the author. And B, it effectively creates a different book, certainly a different feel, less generous, less Trollopian, less conversational. And this is that original version of the book. Amazing. So I grabbed it. I absolutely loved it. But I need to get a hardcover. I need to get the pretty Everyman Library's hardcover. I should probably do that. And actually not Amazon. I should order it at Barnes & Noble and have them bring it into the store. I'll have to do that the next time I'm there, which won't be for a while, but still, because we're coming up on a federal holiday here in America. I'll be complaining about it at length when the time comes. Anyway, what is this next one? Oh, great. Okay, this is the Oxford Book of Detective Stories, an international selection. This is edited by Patricia Craig, who's no slouch at writing detective stories herself, and it's a great detective anthology. There have been a lot of detective anthologies in the course of the last 100 years, more than I know, more than I can count. I'm sure more than 1,000. And I've read a lot of them, and a lot of them, you read a detective anthology, you know, just detective anthology. Is this The Duke's Children? It is. There's The Duke's Children right there. You'll read a lot of these, of detective anthologies, and you'll get the impression right away. When you finish it, you'll think, okay, well, the editor of this wanted to include that one story and just padded out the rest. Or he wanted to include those 2 stories, and everything else was grabbed willy-nilly. This, lovingly put together. And as a result, I have read it from front to back more than once, which is extremely rare for an anthology of any kind. And then the last book. The last book is a historical curiosity. No need to dwell on why I have this. This is a great work of reference, but it's from a long time ago. It's from 100 years ago. This is the volume library. Big, oversized thing where you can learn all about textiles, where you can the multiplex dictionary will show you all kinds of different animals, all kinds of different birds. You can go through the history of America year by year. It will give you weights, measures, basic grammar. This was the elementary school education in the 1920s. Was this book? You could be, by the time you were done with your elementary school education. Oh, look at that, there are the mammals. By the time you were done with your elementary school education back in the 1920s and 30s when this book was being used, this is what you could be held accountable for. It has basic grammar. It has basic world history. It has basic little thumbnail biographies of all the important men and women in human history. It has the way the environment works, the way weather works, the way government works. And it represents, in all of those different areas, graduate level study in 2019. So it gives you a little hint of how things have changed. It's wonderful to flip through. It's a little limited, but it's wonderful, wonderful to flip through. You flip through it, you get to, for instance, there's a whole chapter on astronomy. And I think there's a line in there that someday man may send a probe to the moon. In the 1922 or whenever, that was put together, it never crossed the author's mind that one day men would walk on the moon. Much less that there would be an electronic means for everyone to watch it happen while it was happening. That the future was unwritten. So, but aside from the chronological limitations, oh, what a book. What a book. It's the basics in one book. Plenty of books do that. And you can get much better ones, of course. In 2019, you can get much better ones, basic fact dictionaries that you can get at your bookstore that have everything. This has a place in my heart. So there you go. On an extremely sentimental note, we'll end this shelf. Now, the next shelf is going to present a problem, even for the sexy tripod, because it will involve stooping. So I don't want to do that. So I'm going to have to figure out, I'll have to sit down and just reposition the tripod. But this has gone on way long enough. So I'll figure that out, and we will resume. Thank you, BookTube.